So in the last video we tried making a GTA like game. We implemented the car mechanic and also the shooting mechanics. So in this video I'm gonna actually make this game feel like a GTA game. And what does a GTA game require? A lively open world. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna add pedestrians and NPC cars. And thanks for the immense support you guys showed on the previous video. Some of you guys asked me to make a video in Hindi, but the problem is that I'm South Indian, so my Hindi is weaker than English. So I'm gonna have to speak in English so that the video appeals to a wider audience. So yeah, let's not waste any time and let's get into development. I found this really good city model from Sketchfab, so I'm gonna use this city model as a prototype for this game to test the NPCs. Alright, so I have imported the city to my project, and as you can see, now we can run around the city. And yeah, this is much better than the one I used in the previous video. Now this city looks pretty empty and boring, and GTA games are not empty and boring, as you know. So the first step is we're gonna add pedestrians on the footpath who we can later kill mercilessly by shooting or driving over them. And you know the drill. Let's ask ChatGPT to make a pedestrian script for us. And now let's copy and paste the script that ChatGPT gave us. So Unity has a built-in AI that can be used for NPC characters. It's called nav mesh. And by using script, we can control this nav mesh and set destinations to places and also make it roam around freely. So for that, we're gonna have to set areas on where this nav mesh can walk. And I'm setting it as the footpath area so that he only walks on the footpath. I created some empty objects called waypoint, and this nav mesh will select a random waypoint and move towards it. And once it reaches that waypoint, it will select another random waypoint and move towards it. This is basically how my pedestrian works now. So I wanted my pedestrian to walk over the zebra crossing, but the way it is set in this city is that it's a different mesh. So if I assign it as an area to be walkable, he would only walk on the white stripes. So I created a plain object on top of it and added it as the walkable area, and then once I baked the area, I disabled it. Now my character can walk over the zebra crossing. You can see that the pedestrian object is moving towards a waypoint. Now we don't want this capsule shape to move around on the footpath in the name of a pedestrian. We want an actual human to move around. So that's what we're gonna do now. Let's head over to Mixamo to get a rigged human model. Let's import him to Unity and place it as a child of the pedestrian object, and let's remove the capsule. There you go. Now our pedestrian is moving, but we want him to be animated. So I'm gonna add the walking animation and the idle animation. ChatGPT told me how to set up the animation using the Blender tree. And there you go, our pedestrian is now actually walking. Now you know what GTA players do with their pedestrians. Let's add a mechanic to shoot the pedestrian. First, I want him to get scared. So I'm asking ChatGPT to increase his speed when he gets hit by a bullet. And we already set in the Blender tree that when the speed reaches 6, the run animation plays. So the walk animation transitions to the run animation when he starts moving fast. Now I want him to die when he gets hit by the bullet 3 times. So right now when I hit him 3 times, only a print message comes. I want him to fall like a ragdoll when he dies. So ragdoll requires physics. And if navmesh hates something, that's physics. Navmesh and physics don't go together. When you add a rigid body to a navmesh, this happens. So we have to set the rigid body as kinematic like we did for the car. Only then the nav mesh will work properly. Unity has its own ragdoll system, so we're gonna be using that. We just have to assign each bone to the ragdoll parts. But if we just set it like that, the ragdoll and the animation would be fighting for control. And this abomination happens. Because now each part of the body has a rigid body, and we have to set each of them as a kinematic. Now to make my player fall as a ragdoll, I'm gonna ask ChatGPT on how to do it. So what the script does is that it loops through each child of the ragdoll and sets its kinematic to false. So now when I shoot the player, he falls like a ragdoll. So after finishing it up, as you can see, on shooting, the pedestrian runs. And after shooting him 2 more times, he dies. So you might have noticed in recent games, when you aim at an enemy, the crosshair turns red, indicating that if you shoot right now, it will hit the enemy. So I wanted to add this feature to my game too. So ChatGPT gave me a script to implement that, and it set out a raycast from my gun. And when the raycast hits an object that is tagged as an NPC, it will turn red. When it's not, it turns back to white. But this feature actually made me realize that my aiming was not really accurate, because it would be showing red, but it would not be hitting the enemy because the bullet was not going in the direction I wanted it to. So instead of making the bullet hit the NPC, NPC and then show a reaction, I made the shooting fully use the raycast system and not the bullet. So now we are able to shoot the NPC properly. Now I also want the ragdoll to trigger when I hit the NPC with the car. So I added that to the pedestrian script using on collision enter. But when I actually hit the pedestrian, you can see that it does indeed trigger the ragdoll. But our car is actually slowed down. Now that shouldn't happen on a real life scenario. When something as massive as a car that weighs around 1000 kg hits a person of 50 to 70 kg at a high speed, it is not going to slow down. That won't even affect the speed of the car. The person would just fly away. But the problem is that our pedestrian is a kinematic object. Now hitting a kinematic object is like hitting a wall. Nothing would happen to that object. Now I could just set the pedestrian as not a kinematic once it hits the car, but that still does slow down the car because while it was hitting, it was a kinematic object. And if I don't set it as a kinematic object, you know what happens. I tried explaining my problem to ChatGPT precisely, but it still could not help me out. And finally, I had to come up with a solution, and it's not a perfect one. What I did was that I created a trigger around the pedestrian, and once the car enters the trigger, it sets the pedestrian as a non-kinematic. So even before the collision happens, it becomes a non-kinematic, and therefore it shows the reaction accurately. This is not a perfect solution for this problem, so if you guys have any suggestions, you could just write below. I also set a condition that this should only trigger when its velocity is above 5, so that the pedestrian won't die just because the car slightly touched him. So now as you can see, we can drive around recklessly and hit pedestrians all over just like how we do in GTA games. Here's a slow motion clip for you guys. So because of that trigger method, it caused a problem to the shooting mechanics. Now the crosshair turns red at places it shouldn't be. So what I did is that all pedestrians search for an object called player, and only when he's inside a car, the trigger is enabled. So now I can shoot the pedestrian and also hit him with a car. Great. So now we need the pedestrian to spawn at the random parts of the footpath. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to make a pedestrian spawning script for me. What it's going to do is that at the beginning of the scene, the script will spawn about 50 pedestrians around the player. Now 50 is the maximum limit of the number of pedestrians that should be around the player. And when any of these pedestrians are more than 100 meters away from player, then they will get despawned. So that means the pedestrian count now goes below 50. So it will spawn another pedestrian and keeps repeating this process throughout the game. So the player will always be surrounded by pedestrians. I also added a headshot feature, so if you shoot at his head, the NPC dies instantly. So the pedestrian part is complete. Now we need NPC cars. And I also added a feature where the pedestrian would run away when he hears a shooting sound. So the NPC part was pretty easy because of Unity's own nav mesh system, but that can't be applied to a car because a car doesn't move like a human. It has limitations. It should be realistic. So I asked ChatGPT to make a realistic self-driving NPC car, and this is what it gave me. Yeah, pretty realistic. Hey, what are you laughing at? I created a separate nav mesh and all. I thought maybe you could fake the movement and make it move like a normal object, but also rotating its tire while it's moving. So it feels like as if this car is moving, but all that didn't work. So after hours of research, I found a YouTube video which explained how to implement an AI car the right way. But if I actually learned this tutorial and did it for my game, then this series would not have a purpose because we are making a game using ChatGPT. And ChatGPT was not helping me in any way. So what I did was I took a screenshot of his code and pasted it to ChatGPT and told ChatGPT to make a car AI script just like this one.
Sometimes my genius is... it's almost frightening.
And guess what? It actually worked. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of human brain and an AI working together. So instead of using nav mesh, this actually uses a path to follow. This path has several nodes. I'll be using these nodes around the road and the car will follow the node in order. Now you can see there's a green path laid out on the road and the car is precisely following the path. I also added an obstacle detection so the car stops whenever there's an obstacle in front of it and then starts moving moving again once the obstacle leaves. And right now, if I try to enter this moving car, it will be like this. So we need to make some changes to the enter car script. I made the car kinematic and also disabled its AI script. And now we can enter a moving car. So now I want cars to spawn in multiple places just like how it was with pedestrians. Now this is gonna be tricky because you can't just spawn the car anywhere. As you know, there are two lanes in the road. My game is gonna be following the left side rule because I live in India, so that is more relatable for me. When I tried spawning the car on random locations on the path, it became a huge mess. You can see for yourself what happened. I then tried spawning them in random locations on the Navmesh road, but that looked even worse. Then the only way left for me was to duplicate the car and spread it on the path. But this would eat up a lot of the computer's memory and processing power because you will be spawning cars everywhere on the map. I turned off the mesh renderer of the car if it is more than 100 meters away from the player. So logically, the cars would be there, so the computer don't have to render them unless they are close. So as you can see here, I'm moving around the map and the cars are getting spawned and despawned depending on the distance between them and the player. So there we have it. We have a lively city for our GTA game. We made NPC cars and NPC pedestrians, and now the city looks lively. It almost feels like an open world action game. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up and be sure to subscribe for more content. I'll see you guys in the next devlog.